It was a day I will never forget. The day everything changed. The drums had stopped. The sun was high, and the village gathered. I stood there, surrounded by my people, confident, proud, and unaware that my world was about to fall apart. My closest friend, a man I had trusted with my life, had betrayed me. I had always been a warrior, born and trained for battle. My father, before me, was one of the greatest warriors of our people, and I was determined to honor him. My friend, Tembo, and I had fought side by side for years, through thick and thin. We were brothers in arms, but on that day, when I stood before the chief to ask for his daughter's hand in marriage, I learned the depth of Tembo's betrayal. The chief's daughter, Amara, and I had known each other since childhood. Our connection was deep, and though words were never exchanged about it, we knew we were meant for each other. The day I decided to ask for her hand, I felt invincible. Little did I know, Tembo had been working behind my back. The chief looked at me with cold eyes. He didn't smile, didn't nod in approval. I remember the words so clearly. You have served this village well, Masika, but the hand of my daughter has already been promised. I was confused, shocked. Who could it be? No one had shown interest in Amara but me. That's when Tembo stepped forward, standing tall and smug. The chief announced that it was he who would marry Amara, not me. I was stunned. I turned to Tembo, my friend, my brother, and I saw in his eyes a man I no longer recognized. His face was hard, and his smile was thin, almost mocking. I thought you would understand, Masika, he said, his voice smooth and calm. She deserves someone who can lead, not just fight. His words cut deep. I felt the sting of betrayal in my chest. The man I had trusted with everything had taken the one thing I held most dear. Rage surged inside me, but I didn't act on it. Instead, I stood there, fists clenched, my heart breaking. That was the beginning of my exile. The chief, believing that the warrior scorned was a danger to the peace of the village, ordered me to leave. He said I was too proud, too consumed by the battle to understand what true leadership meant. He banished me from the village, telling me to never return. I wandered for days, weeks, maybe even months. Time lost its meaning as I journeyed alone. The betrayal weighed on me like a stone, my heart heavy with anger and sorrow. I lived off the land, traveling far from the kingdom, across mountains and rivers, deep into unknown lands. During my exile, I trained, I fought wild animals, learned the ways of other warriors, and became stronger than I ever thought possible. But no amount of strength could shake the bitterness I felt toward Tembo. I had been betrayed, and all I could think of was returning, not just to reclaim Amara, but to prove that I was worthy of my place, of the love I had lost. Years passed, and I became known as a fierce warrior in distant lands. But I never forgot where I came from or what had been taken from me. I still dreamed of Amara, still thought of the life we could have had if not for Tembo's treachery. One day, news came to me that changed everything. The village I once called home was in trouble. A rival tribe had declared war, and the chief's warriors, led by Tembo, were struggling to defend the kingdom. They were losing, and the village was on the verge of being destroyed. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose. I knew what I had to do. I didn't care about the pain or betrayal anymore. All I knew was that my people needed me. So, I set out on the long journey back to the village I had once been forced to leave. When I arrived, the village was barely standing. Smoke rose from burnt huts, and the air was thick with the smell of defeat. The people were huddled together, fearful and broken. Tembo, once proud and confident, was nowhere to be seen. I walked through the village, unnoticed at first, but as people began to recognize me, whispers spread. Masika has returned, they said. I made my way to the chief's hut, where I found him old and weak, a shadow of the man who had banished me. You should not have returned, the chief said, his voice trembling with both age and fear. I am not here for revenge, I replied. I am here to fight for my people, for the village that raised me. The chief looked at me for a long moment before nodding. He didn't have the strength to argue, and he knew I was their only hope. The next day, I led the warriors into battle. Tembo was among them, his face pale and full of doubt. He didn't dare look me in the eye, and I didn't need him to. I wasn't fighting for him, or even for Amara anymore. I was fighting for my people, for the honor of the village. The battle was fierce, but I had learned much in my years of exile. The rival tribe was powerful, but they were no match for the strength and strategy one had gained. We fought for hours, and by the end of the day, we had driven the invaders back. The village was saved. When the battle was over, I stood before the warriors, the villagers, and the chief. Tembo approached me, his head hung low. I betrayed you, Masika, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought I was doing what was best for the village, but I was wrong. I looked at him, my old friend, the man who had taken so much from me. The anger I had once felt was gone. replaced by something else, understanding. Tembo had made a mistake, but he had also suffered for it. I forgive you, I said, not because of what you've done, but because I know what it means to lose yourself to pride. Tembo looked up at me, tears in his eyes. He didn't deserve my forgiveness, but I gave it anyway, because in that moment, I realized that true strength wasn't in winning battles or holding grudges. It was in letting go. After the battle, Amara came to me. She hadn't married Tembo after all. The chief had cancelled the wedding when the war broke out. She stood before me, the same beautiful, strong woman I had loved all those years ago. I never forgot you, she said softly. I always knew you would return. I smiled, but it wasn't the same smile I had worn years ago. I had changed. I wasn't the same man who had left the village in anger. I had learned that love isn't something you can take by force, and pride isn't something you can hold on to forever. In the end, I reclaimed not just my place in the village, but also the love I had once lost. But more importantly, I reclaimed myself. I learned that strength is not just about fighting for what you want, but about knowing when to let go, to forgive, and to move forward. And that is how I became not just a warrior, but a leader.